Hi, my name is Ricky, and I am a pilot and entrepreneur. Welcome to the Positive Rate Aviation Podcast. Here, we aim to lead others to climb to their full potential through the lens of aviation. Join us as we navigate the skies of personal development, leadership, and success, drawing inspiration from the principles that guide aviators to soar higher and further. Whether you're a seasoned aviator or someone who's reaching for new heights in life and career, prepare for a journey where every episode promises to uplift and to inspire you to take control of your own success. Thanks for watching. All right. Welcome to the Positive Rate Aviation Podcast, episode 6. And here at Positive Rate, our goal is leading others to climb to their full potential through the lens of aviation. And today I'm joined by special guest Joshua Cabo Gunderson. Cabo, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, just like you mentioned with the goal of the podcast and empowering people and using aviation to do that, I'm a huge proponent of that. So very thankful to be here and happy to spend some time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know how it can be, so thanks again for that. Cabo is currently serving in the Nevada Air National Guard, fairly recently separated from active duty, but has made that transition over to the Guard as well as flying a corporate Part 91 gig. So all exciting stuff that, we're going to kind of get into. So, without further ado, just kind of want to get straight into it and ask what led you to a career as a pilot, and how did you get started, and pretty much what was your why?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I actually don't remember a time where I didn't want to fly fighter jets in the Air Force. My family all moved here from Cuba back in '66. At least the majority of my family did. So nobody in my family really had an extensive military background, at least in my close family, like my mom, dad, siblings kind of thing. I have two cousins that served in the military, and my uncle on my dad's side served in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. But before I really knew what service was and talked to them about their service, or before they even joined the Air Force, I always wanted to fly jets. And it's funny, with my family predominantly coming from Cuba, my uncle played professional baseball, and I looked very similar to him. So they were like, "Yeah, you got to play baseball," And I love the sport of baseball; it's great. But I've always known that I wanted to fly jets, and I can't quite, put my finger on exactly what that moment in time was. But from the very beginning of my, memory, I've always wanted to fly fighter jets in the Air Force, and I was very thankful to have a mother who was very supportive of that. She would always take me to air shows, and she would constantly pushed me to pursue that goal. And that included applying to the Air Force Academy, applying to the Naval Academy, applying to all these schools that kind of led me to a path of flying fighter jets in the military. And thankful it worked out, but I think with most people, especially young people, they have to have some kind of mentor figure in their life to help guide them along, and shows them what they can achieve and what is possible. Because a lot of, especially with a demo job, you travel around, you see a lot of young kids who kind of lack direction, who lack some motivation, somewhat, in despair about what they're going to do. And they may have some kind of hurdle in their life that, that seems insurmountable, something they can't overcome. And all it takes is somebody spending some time, whether it's your podcast, listening to this, or whatever it is, taking some time to talk to them and explain to them that all the goals you have in life, you can achieve those. And honestly, there's no better country in the world in terms of opportunity than America, so I was fortunate enough to have the goal of flying fighter jets come to reality after a lot of hard work and a lot of amazing mentors along the way.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's so important that you highlight that, kind of gets into what I mentioned quite a bit. Anyone who's listened to this can attest to that. But, nobody really does this, well, really anything, but in terms of aviation, really does this on their own. You got to have a support system around you and more importantly, mentors, which is huge.
Absolutely.
So you kind of answered my next question, but I was going to ask if the going to the academy was kind of a goal that you had early on. Was it the Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, or did you just know whichever service academy I attend, I just know I want to fly military fighters?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to fly military fighters, and the academy out of all the commissioning sources, so you have the Air Force Academy or the other service academies, you have ROTC programs, then you have officer training school or officer candidate school, depending on the service. And percentage wise, the Air Force Academy or any of the other academies is your highest chance of getting a pilot training slot. Obviously, that doesn't guarantee you to go fly fighters, but it does give you a chance to go compete at pilot training. So when I looked at those opportunities, I was like, well, the Air Force Academy likely has the highest percentage chance of all the service academies because we have physically more spots for pilots than the Navy or the Marine Corps or the Army. And then I looked at, those different options. I attended summer seminar at the academies. So I went to the Air Force Academy, went to Naval Academy, and spent a week there my junior year of high school. And it's funny, actually, I was writing the Air Force Academy and the Naval Academy when I was like in elementary school. My mom would laugh because she would say that, I had like crayon written letters, probably not that exaggerative, but, I was writing to them from a very, very young age because I knew that's what I wanted to do. And that was the best chance of going to fly fighter jets in the military. And when it came down to it, I went to the summer seminar programs my junior year in high school, saw both academies. And, I say both academies only because West Point doesn't have a fighter, fleet.
Right.
So, or the Army doesn't have a fighter fleet. But both academies are beautiful. The Annapolis was gorgeous, very, amazing history between the naval aviation and the Navy as a whole and as a service. But when I got off the airplane in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I saw the mountains and I saw the campus and the academy and all the flying programs between gliders, between skydiving, I was just immediately set on the Air Force Academy. That also, kind of was in line with my favorite fighter jet growing up, which was the F-15C. And I just love that airplane. It's, two big engines, two big wings, big vertical tails, lots of missiles. And I'm like, that's America right there.
Yeah.
So, I love the F-15. It's an amazing airplane. And, the Air Force is the only service that flies it. So the fact that my favorite airplane is F-15, the fact that I loved the Air Force Academy when I got off the airplane in Colorado Springs, you got to experience the academy and see it, kind of just led me down the Air Force Academy path. And I think it sounds stupid now when I look back on it, but I really left myself no option B. I applied to the Air Force Academy. I did not apply to the Naval Academy, West Point. I didn't apply for ROTC scholarships. I didn't apply to any other schools. Like I started the application process, but I was like, nope, I'm going to the Air Force Academy. I found out I got accepted in February of 2004, so the year I started school there. And I still had time to apply to other schools, so it wasn't a complete, abandonment of other options. But I was just so focused on that being the goal, and I really didn't give myself an option outside of the Air Force Academy, which, like I said, in hindsight may seem a little stupid. But man, in my room, I had pictures of the Air Force Academy, I had pictures of F-15s, I had pieces of yarn that connected all the pictures to include the path, what scores I need on SATs, what score I need on ACTs. What did I need to do extracurricular wise? And it kind of all linked into this like beautiful mind little project in my room. And I saw that every morning when I woke up. I saw it every night before I went to sleep. And it constantly reminded me of what the goal was. And that was, I think, very helpful because as you and I both know, you have long days sometimes and it seems like the goals, whether it's in your upgrade right now in your pursuit of aviation, like, and I'd say your pursuit, I think aviation is a lifelong pursuit because we all start this journey and we all learn and gain skills and experience. So no matter where you are in your timeline of learning about aviation, it's a lifelong pursuit and it takes a lot of dedication and there are some long days and tough days. So how do you get past those tough days? And for me, it was constantly seeing that goal in front of me. And like I said, I applied to the Air Force Academy and just put all my eggs in that basket. And I think all the amazing mentorship from my family, friends, teachers just kind of helped me get across the finish line with that goal of getting to the Air Force Academy and getting accepted there.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So with that, would you say that in your experience, academy grads typically see a little bit more success in pilot training versus their ROTC counterparts?
I actually wouldn't say that at all. And the reason I say, the reason I say it's kind of depends on the person. You have a lot of folks that get into the academy and they do really well at the academy, and they just don't have a knack for flying airplanes. So they may go to pilot training and put the work in, and they just don't have the hand and feet skills to do really well. But I think more importantly, I think academy grads, ROTC grads, OTS grads, it doesn't really matter where your commissioning source was from. It really comes down to the work ethic you put in at the course itself. And interestingly enough, when you go to school at the Air Force Academy, you have your day planned out every single day. So you're going to have, your class load. You have your sport activities. If you're a Division I athlete, if you fly at the airport like I did, there's so many things pulling at your time. So you have very, very little free time, and everything is accounted for. Whereas in ROTC, you are having to do really well in school. You have to do ROTC, but you're ultimately managing your schedule. If you don't want to go to class one day, you don't have to. If you want to do this, want to do that, you can choose to do that, right? So you have a lot more freedom in terms of your decision making. And the reason I think that's important is when you get to pilot training, some of my academy classmates who went to pilot training with, that was the first taste of freedom. They were like, man, left my parents' house, went to high school. After high school, went to the Air Force Academy. That all my time was accounted for at the Air Force Academy. So now is my first time to be like free. And some people will kind of take that to the extreme, and they don't realize the long-term goal is still to fly airplanes in the Air Force. And that 1 year of training and pilot training is going to determine what your vector is in your Air Force career. So some of my, ROTC counterparts that were pilot training did really well because they had already mastered that level of time management. And like I said, it's not to say that academy cadets don't have time management skills, because they do. I just think they didn't have that freedom that ROTC cadets or OTS grads had previously. So it was kind of a new thing. They're like, it's all new, right? Pilot training, freedom, all this stuff. Now they're second lieutenants in the Air Force. So like, oh, I get paid for this. That's pretty cool. So it's just a lot of changes at once. So I would say at the end of the day, like, it kind of all is even, and it really comes down to the individual and what kind of commitment they make to themselves and to the program in terms of how they succeed.
Right, for sure. So what point in the during your time at the academy do you actually know that you actually earned that pilot slot?
So you find out your junior year that what your AFSC is going to be. So I was, basically a pilot training AFSC. I think it's 9 Tango Oscar, I think is what it is. Or Tango Zero. And so then you're like, okay, I've got a pilot training slot. And then your senior year, about 100 days prior to graduation, you actually get your assignment to what base you're going to go to, whether it's Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas, you have Vance in Oklahoma, you have Columbus in Mississippi, and you have Shepherd in Texas. Right. So that was, that's kind of the progression of timelines of how you find out you're going to be a pilot, and then also where you're going to be going to pilot training.
Gotcha. So with that, you just made me think about something else. So when you get that respective assignment, whether it's Columbus or Laughlin or what have you, does that kind of give you an idea? Like, okay, I'm probably going to be more so on the heavies track, or, I know if I go to Columbus, it's a good chance that I'll probably be fine, flying fighters.
Yeah, I think the best. So the only program that's specifically designed for fighter aviation is the one at Shepherd Air Force Base, and that's NJEPT. It's a Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training. So it's not just American pilots; it's also partner nations from NATO that send their students there to learn how to fly airplanes. And it's the only pilot training base where you're guaranteed to go from T6s to T38s. So you will, if you go to Shepherd, you will definitely fly T38s. Obviously, if you don't do well, they can non-fighter qualify you, and then you can send you somewhere else. But you're at least going to have the opportunity to go fly T38s and compete. And the percentages of getting a fighter or attack or a bomber aircraft out of Shepherd are a lot higher than getting, transports. Funny enough, when I went to pilot training in 2008, I graduated in May of 2008. Went to Shepherd in August. The first couple of assignments from the classes that were just graduating were all fighters, just like F-16 for you, F-15 for you, and everybody's like rejoicing and all happy. And then like 2 or 3 classes after those first few, it started dropping. Like, you had the RPAs, unmanned aircraft, the Predators at the time. You had the non-specified aircraft, so like U-28s, stuff like that, working for AFSOC. And everybody was looking around. They were like, wait, I thought I was at Shepherd. I thought I was going to go fly fighters, and it feels like the world's falling, And I think it's changed back, but at the time, they just didn't need as many fighter pilots. So even Shepherd was affected. In terms of the other bases, so Vance, Columbus, or Laughlin, you start off in T6s. Everybody does that, and you're going to do aerobatics, formation, all those disciplines that you would do in a fighter track. And then after that first 6 month period in the T6, you'll either track select to T-38s and go fighter bomber, or you'll track select to heavies, or you can go to helos as well. But everybody kind of starts off in T6s. But then really it's like competition in the T6s to then get into the T-38s, whereas at Shepherd, you're kind of automatically guaranteed to go T-38s.
Okay. That's interesting. So with that, when you kind of got into your pilot training, I know going back to the beginning, you said that the F-15 was your favorite jet.
Yeah.
Now, once you actually got through the academy, you got through UPT. Did you kind of know at that point, like, okay, I want the 22, or were you still kind of dead set on the 15 at that time?
So at the time, there were no F-22s available in pilot training when my
Okay.
class was graduating. So it's funny. I've always loved the F-15, and my flight commander at the time was an F-15 pilot. So when they had to, they gave us our list and said, "Hey, fill this out from 1 through 26 or whatever it was in terms of options that were available." I just put F-15C 1 through 26, and my flight commander, my flight commander pulls me into the office and he's like laughing because he's an F-15C guy and he knew I wanted to fly F-15Cs, and he's like, "Dude, I get it, but you have to give me some other options."
Right.
And so I was like, okay. So I thought about what airplane mission do I think is really important. For me, like I said, I've always loved the air-to-air mission. It's very dynamic. It's always changing. You're never going to fly the same mission twice. And then I thought about other airplanes out there. And to me, I actually love the A-10. Like I know people, it's going away and it's slow. It has its own issues, right? But I think the mission of the A-10 is so important. Close air support, taking care of the 18-year-old with a rifle on the battlefield is so critically important in terms of the Air Force's role in our overall, joint fight. And based on that, I was like, okay, well, it's single mission. It's got two engines. I love that. And it's, single pilot. So I put F-15C, A-10, and then I don't remember what I put after that. It didn't really matter in my mind. I was like, those are the two
Right.
I want to fly.
Yeah.
And like I said, the F-22, they were giving out F-22 assignments at the time, but it was like one every three classes, and it just wasn't in my class. It wasn't in my drop. Um, so a funny story, kind of a segue to another kind of, I guess, life lesson would be when our drop night happened, I actually got assigned A-10s because there were no F-15Cs in the class.
Mm.
So even though it was on our list of possible options, they didn't have any at the time. So I ended up getting A-10s, and then I spent about 4 months. I went to survival training, did all this stuff, and a good buddy of mine, Beans McLaughlin, was in my class for pilot training, and he was going to A-10 school as well. So we were pumped. We were like, man, we're going to Tucson together. It's gonna be great. We're gonna fly A-10s. It's gonna be sweet. And about 4 months later, two students got F-15Cs that wanted A-10s. And then I was working like awards and decks at the group level, just in some little cubicle. And the guy that did assignments was a lieutenant colonel. And he came around the corner and he was like, "Hey, you wanted F-15Cs, right?" I was like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Okay." And then he like walked off. I was like, that was really weird, And then the next day, the only reason I know this is my birthday. He walks up to me and gives me a birthday card with an F-15 driver patch on it.
Oh
And
wow.
he was like, "Hey man, congrats, you got your Eagle." And I was like, "Holy cow. Like this is absolutely amazing. It was the best birthday gift ever."
Yeah.
But I share that story only because obviously like I was excited about the A-10, but as a little kid, I wanted to fly the F-15. And I was a little bit bummed, I was like, man, I really wanted to fly the F-15, but that, it's okay. Like A-10's a phenomenal airplane. And I say that because, had I got an F-16 or an F-15E or whatever it was, I probably would have been off the train by then. And
Right.
that F-15C opportunity would have never happened. So I share that story because sometimes in life we have these like hurdles and these obstacles and these these events that happen, and we're like, shoot, that's not what I wanted to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know why it happened. And sometimes it takes us a long time to figure it out. But in that case, it took me 4 months to figure it out. It was like, man, had I not gotten an A-10, then I could have never swapped with the guys that had F-15s. And then I would have never flown my dream airplane. And then I would have never gone to the Raptor, never done F-22 demo. Like all these things cascaded from that event, right? And a lot of times we beat ourselves up. We're our own worst critic a lot of times. And we beat ourselves up over things we can't control and things that happen out of our control. And I'd share that as one example of a time in my life where it didn't go the way I planned it was going to go, only because that enabled the follow on, the follow on things to happen. And I'm so incredibly thankful for that. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Sometimes.
Splitter Kelly is he was the lieutenant colonel assignments guy at the time, and man, like it was like the best news ever. It was
Yeah.
just super super cool for him to come to me and hand that birthday card, and I was like, this is
Yeah.
amazing.
That's a heck of a birthday.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny, like you say, sometimes you feel like your blessings are being blocked, but really, sometimes it could just be teaching you something. Sometimes it could be protecting you from something that you don't even, that you really don't even know about. And it kind of took me a long time to realize that too. And I think it just comes with maybe a little bit of age and maturity, right?
yeah,
Because we want what we want, especially in this day and age. We're in the age of instant gratification, right? So when things don't go our way, we're like, we're upset about it. But again, once you mature a little bit and with age, you're like, you know what? Let me just enjoy the journey. Let me just accept it for what it is. I'm not going to stress about something that I can't control. Just control what you can, pretty much.
yeah, and I think sometimes, like you said, especially today's day and age, where we want to get what we want at the time we want it.
Yeah,
Um, it's funny because sometimes you chase goals like that's what I want. That's what I want. And you keep working at it, and you sometimes maybe working in the opposite direction of what the best thing for you is.
hmm
It's like the harder you work chasing something or someone or whatever it is that's not right for you, it just takes you longer to eventually get to where you should be. Um,
exactly.
and this is funny. Like there's an old. I was driving back from. I was in Klamath Falls for a buddy of mine's retirement this past weekend, and driving the car and like that song. I don't know if you've heard of it. This old Garth Brooks song called "Unanswered Prayers," and it talks about that. It's like all these unanswered prayers, actually worked out for you in the end, and you just didn't think so at the time. But then when they kind of reveal themselves, you're like, man, this is where I should have been the entire time.
Right, right. Um, so cool. So you ended up getting the switch that you wanted. You ended up getting your blessing. So with that, kind of talk to me about that. Like how long did you fly? The C model, and what was that transition, or like leading up to the transition to the Raptor?
Yeah. So I went to I went to F-15 school in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Beautiful location, amazing training airspace, and at the time, it was the only F-15C course in the Air Force. So we had a ton of experience. I mean, everybody there had 2 to 3,000 hours of F-15 time. So
Wow.
incredibly experienced pilots, and it was just an absolute joy to be there. I remember hearing all the all the lead up to the F-15 school was always like the F-15 school is the hardest. They wash out the most. They eat their young. This whole thing, and I get there, and I worked really hard while I was there. But man, everybody was so competent and so invested in you succeeding that they held the line. They want to make sure that we're not going to let anybody just pass the course. We want to make sure that the standard is a standard. We're not going to let you deviate from that. But if you're working hard and you meet the standard, they will invest so much time and effort into you. And it was an absolute blessing to go to school there for F-15 training. And then from there, I went to Okinawa, Japan, and flew the F-15 in the 44th Fighter Squadron for about 3 years. And then out of that assignment is when I went to the F-22. I did a transition course, which was about 3 months long in Florida. And then I went up to Alaska and flew F-22s in the 90th Fighter Squadron for about 4.5 years before doing the demo job.
Oh wow. Okay. So did you get any Raptor F-22 deployment, real world
We
deployment
did, yeah.
experience?
So we deployed in 2016 with the 90th, and that was in the Middle East. And there was a variety of missions, anything from close air support to airborne, like kind of protection of different assets.
Wow. Um.
And
So
for all and
how do
just
you?
for all my friends who are A-10 pilots, F-15E pilots, F-16 pilots, me saying F-22 in CAS, close air support, I know it doesn't make sense. We did our best, but we were there for other reasons, but we helped out with that as well. And
Right.
I mean, that was an absolute. It was I think it was an incredible experience as an air-to-air guy being in a war that was mostly air to ground.
Right.
I still think the bigger picture of what an air battle looks like in terms of management, logistics, planning, coordination, all those things that go into a large scale, air conflict. I think it was so valuable to learn those lessons and be there and be a part of the mix that even though we weren't doing our air-to-air mission of shooting other airplanes down because there just weren't any to shoot down,
Right.
I think there were so many lessons that were learned in that process, which I thought was super valuable. And then we were supposed to deploy again, and like the day before we flew it, we were supposed to fly out the SecDef actually turned it off. So everybody's like packed up, ready to go, getting ready to leave the next day. And they're like, hey guys, so here's some news. We're actually not leaving
Oh
tomorrow.
man.
But yeah, so I did one deployment to the Middle East, the F-15C, and then one in the F-22.
Okay. How competitive was that process in terms of applying for the demo position?
It's I think it's pretty competitive. You have to have a certain minimum qualification. You have to be an instructor pilot in the airplane, which means you've probably been flying the F-22 for anywhere between 3 to 5 years of experience just in the F-22. And then beyond that, then they bring you in, they look at records reviews, they bring in people for interviews. So they will down select from the records and say, hey, we want to interview these 4 to 5 people. And then from there, you go and interview. And really, the demo team job is so unique in the sense that it's not just flying an airplane. It's not just, whatever. It's so many things, right? You're the person in charge and ultimately responsible for the success or failure of that team. You get a schedule from Air Combat Command that says, hey, here are the shows you're doing. And then in terms of the schedule itself, like you're on the road by yourself with your team and you rely heavily upon the senior listed person on the team. So the superintendent, you rely upon the team chief, you rely upon all the people on the team that play their specific roles to get that job done. And every weekend we're on the road somewhere different, and with the F-22, we don't have our own airplanes. It was coming back to Langley, swapping tails, going to Eglin, picking up jets, going to Nellis, picking up jets, meeting people from Alaska to use their jets, meeting people in Singapore to use their jets. So it was this big logistical puzzle that we're constantly solving. And I'm definitely not a one-man show. Like it took so much effort from the entire team to get this right. And you think about all like I said, the logistics, the maintenance of new airplanes every weekend. The guys have to constantly flex and figure out, okay, what problems does this airplane have? How do we fix it to make sure it's ready to go for the show? You're coordinating with public affairs to do all the outreach events. We did about 2 to 3 outreach events per show location, and we did about 25 to 30 show locations a year. So we're talking around 75 school visits every year, and then we start adding Zoom calls on top of that. So we're a lot of community outreach stuff. So in terms of the application process for the demo job, if you're an instructor pilot in the F-22, like the current demo pilot, whoever that happens to be, can teach you how to fly the demo. It's not like the flying portion is meant to be amazing, but it's also meant to be incredibly safe because we're doing it for kids, and we don't want those kids to have a really bad experience in an air show with some kind of mishap or whatever. So the air show is meant to be amazing, but very, very safe. The big thing they care about, I think, in the interviews is really what is your story? What value do you add in terms of recruiting, in terms of connection and touch points to the American public to be able to showcase this airplane, showcase the teamwork of the United States Air Force, and do that really well consistently over a long period of time. I mean, as you can imagine, being on the road 200 days a year is just taxing. And then you're in a different city every weekend, meeting new people, going to different schools, new show location in terms of operations and flying. And oh, by the way, we're working on the weekends. So how many bases do you know are working full staff on the weekends? Not many, right? Not many. So if a part breaks, our guys are on the phone, overnight FedExing stuff. I mean, my superintendent at the time, Master Sergeant George Fagan, we drove 15 hours one day to pick up a part, while people from Eglin were driving 15 hours to meet us halfway to pick up a part, take it back to South Texas. The guys worked overnight to replace the part just so we could fly the show the next day. And it's incredible. The teamwork, and I think the teamwork piece is so, like I said, when you're in charge of the demo team, you're leading that team of amazing people, and you have to be able to give them direction. But also, I think the most important thing you do in that job is to give them purpose. Like what is the purpose, right? Because people will bend over backwards and work super late into the night, work incredibly hard if they understand why their job is really important. And when they see little kids at air shows and their eyes light up and they're pointing at the jet as it's flying by, or they get to take pictures with the team or whatever it is, it's so easily visible. They're like, okay, I know why I'm doing this, because I'm having an impact on all of these people, whether young kids or people, that have served before from previous wars. It's just a massive impact. So when you have an amazing mission like that, people will bend over backwards. You hire the right people and they do some amazing work for sure.
Yeah, I know that part of it never gets old. Seeing those kids, the faces light up and run up to you and want to give you a hug and take a picture, like that right there, I'm sure makes all that worth it.
Yeah, and I think all of us probably felt that we were getting the better end of the deal every time because
right.
we get to hang out with some really amazing people and talk about veterans. the air show crowd brings out a lot of people that have served in various wars. And we got a chance to meet a lot of folks from World War II, which there aren't many left. We got to meet some original Tuskegee Airmen. We got to meet like so many people that were so impressive. And you're like, man, I'm nobody compared
Yeah.
to you guys because
Right.
you guys did some amazing stuff and just were so focused on supporting and defending America and going through some terrible conditions and still getting the job done.
Hmm.
It's just you have no words. You're just so impressed by these people.
Right. Yeah, one other question I wanted to ask about the demo team. So obviously, I know that you were the commander, and like you said, you were in charge of logistics, planning, dealing with PA and things like that. But did you all have is there an alternate pilot that you all have like on standby? Like if you were to fall ill or something like that, that way the show could still
Nope.
go on, or is it a one? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a one pilot show. So we have
Wow.
a safety observer. We always fly with two jets. So just like in combat, we're always going to fly with another airplane. And that safety observer is a combat squadron pilot. We have six of them per year, and they alternate shows. They don't go to all the shows. But they'll bring the second jet out. They're also on the radio during the air show itself to make sure that all parameters, airspeed, altitude, angle of attack, all those things are within limits. And we're talking on the radio back and forth the entire time. They're also scanning around for any kind of hazards, whether it's like stranger traffic, so other airplanes flying into the TFR for the
Right.
air show. If there are big birds, I mean, holy cow, in Sanford, Florida, outside of Orlando, I think there were like pterodactyls flying around. I remember flying the show, and I was in formation with a Mustang F-16 F-35, and I remember just seeing these big black dots go ripping by, and they're just these massive birds. But the safety observers looking out for all these things, letting us know where things are at and hazards are at, so we can make sure that we're safe during the show because we're so focused on making sure the show is safe and executing the maneuvers as they're designed that
Right.
once again, it's a team effort, right? There's a safety observer there. The superintendent and the team chief are working the music and the narration, coordinating the whole thing through timing. And yeah, it's like everything in life. It just comes down to a team effort, and we don't do anything ourselves by any stretch.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's awesome. So how do you see the role of the F-22 evolving, like in future of air combat?
I think the F-22 is such a critical airplane because we built. One, the capabilities are phenomenal. There's no other plane like it. I don't know if we'll ever build any airplane like the F-22 ever again. I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. But we definitely need it, and I think about the few numbers of them. We just have to make sure we adapt and develop it. And one of the things that people don't often see is that the hardware and software solutions that we develop for the F-22 oftentimes are all internal to the airplane. Because it is a stealth airplane, so we like take a panel off and replace stuff and computers and widgets. So you don't see those changes, but the F-22 is constantly evolving, and we're making it more lethal, more survivable as we take these new emerging tech capabilities and integrate them into the F-22. But ultimately, I think we need to have it. And just from a pure numbers game, we we don't have enough fighter planes out there. We didn't build enough F-22s for sure. So we need every single one we can have and all the pilots we can have to be qualified in that airplane to use it. Hopefully we never do, right? And I think if you ask anybody in the military, um, no, I don't think anybody wants conflict, right? Because then conflict inherently means that innocent people are going to die. Obviously, you have combatants, right? Like you're gonna murder those clowns. That's your
Right.
abilities,
Right.
but they're innocents that will always die in conflict. Period, and that's something we can't avoid. And we do everything we can to mitigate that. We don't want to ever hurt anybody innocent, but people are gonna be killed on both sides, and we don't want that, right? So I think most military people, if not all, will say they don't want conflict. So I hope we never have to use the F-22. That'd be ideal. But
Right.
if we do, we need to have the most lethal, amazing piece of air-to-air tech in the world out there on the
Hmm.
front lines doing its job.
Absolutely. What are some key performance like characteristics with the F-22 that you can speak on that kind of make it unique compared to modern fighters?
Yeah. The characteristics, I'll just kind of poke fun at my F-35 friends for a little bit. They call it a fifth gen aircraft. Lockheed Martin adapted the definition of fifth generation aircraft to accommodate the F-35. It was a different definition when the F-22 was around. But
Yeah.
they always joke, call us the legacy fifth gen. I'm like, well, last time I checked, we're the only fifth gen. Now they've changed the definitions. Got it.
Right.
And I may end up going flying the F-35 in the future, so I'm just poking fun at it. And I think people that are interested in military aviation understand that we all kind of just joke around, but ultimately we're all on the same team, and the F-35 plays a critical role in what we do as an Air Force. And we're going to have lots of them. Our partner nations are going to have a lot of them. So, it has to be a really good airplane, and we're working every single day to make it more lethal, more survivable. In terms of the F-22 specifically, so Super Cruise is one of those capabilities that other airplanes just don't have. And that allows us to cruise at supersonic speeds without using afterburner. And not just like barely above the speed of sound, like 1.01, 1.02 Mach. We're talking, like 1.5 kind of, plus speeds. And the airplane will comfortably do it. It'll be very high, very fast, and very efficient, relatively speaking, in terms of gas consumption. So that ability allows us to get to places very quickly, do our job, have more gas than on station, do our job, and then get home quickly as well. So if we're around a lot of threats, whether it's surface to air threats, air to air threats, whatever it is, we can kind of get into those areas and penetrate that airspace, unlike other airplanes can do, which is amazing. Obviously, it's stealthy, so makes it much more difficult for people to find us with their
Right.
systems. And then one of the really nice things, integrated avionics. The F-15 or the F-16 or the F-18 for that matter, all of them had a different screen for different systems. So your brain basically is taking information from like 5 or 6 sources, trying to piece it together and figure out what is happening around me in the battle space to make the best decision I can to use this airplane as part of a team to do our job. The F-22 takes all that information, puts it on one screen. You do have other screens as well that give you additional information, but if you only flew and looking at one screen, you would really have all the information you needed to do a mission,
Wow.
which is nice, right? It's all color coded. So the age of people that play games and stuff, it's just like, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that really was a game changer in terms of the ability for you to take information and process it and use the airplane as a weapon. Whereas it was just a little more time intensive and labor intensive in other aircraft. In terms of super maneuverability, so the air show is a great place to see that. The F-22 looks like, it's a rocket ship, and then it'll
Right.
go and do backflips, it'll do cartwheels, it'll do all this stuff that's allowed, it's basically made possible through the flight control system. And part of the flight control system we have are the thrust vectoring nozzles in the back. So those go up and down, and I would talk to kids at schools, for example, and I'd say thrust vectoring, and obviously they don't know what that means. So I'm like, well, how do I explain thrust vectoring to somebody?
Yeah.
And I'm like, take your garden hose, put your thumb over it, and then like move your thumb left and right. And as the water changes direction, that's
Yeah.
thrust vectoring. So we're taking 70,000 pounds of thrust and we're moving it in different
Yeah.
directions, which flips the airplane through the sky. That combined with the big flight control surfaces allow us to almost deflect air. And we do a thing called post-stall maneuvering. So, as any pilot understands, stall is a point at which the wing gets to critical angle of attack. It can't produce enough lift anymore, and it's going to fall out of the sky. And most airplanes are uncontrollable at that point, right? There's not enough lift over the wings, enough airflow to basically allow it to be maneuverable anymore. In the F-22, we actually can still maneuver in that post-stall regime. So we'll be well past our stall point, and the airplane is still 100% under control and maneuverable.
Wow.
And the way I describe that is, imagine a skydiver, like you're falling through the sky and your hands are out and you turn by just deflecting air. So you're like moving your hand in different directions to turn, you're moving your legs, and you're basically just deflecting air to move your body through the sky. And that's the same way the F-22 is maneuvering in those post-stall regimes.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
And the engineers and the folks who designed the airplane, like hats off to them. Like they came up with the most amazing piece of tech. And at the Reno Air Races, I was able to meet some of the 5 of the initial designers of the F-22, and it was just like I sat there in awe because their knowledge, their abilities to go from the design on a piece of paper to this airplane eventually and incorporate all these things, it's just astounding. It's a huge testament to American engineering and design and being able to problem solve to create a solution that's unlike any other airplane in the world.
Absolutely. So with that, when you speak about, the thrust vectoring and, how highly maneuverable this airplane actually is, how crucial and critical is it for you to stay like in shape and, exercise and diet and all of that? Like how much would you say that affects you guys long term?
I think you're going to get a varying answer on that one from different people. But I think for me, one thing that's been consistently important to me is weight training. My diet will like ebb and flow based on if am I going home for Thanksgiving, or I'm probably
Right.
not going to eat healthy on Thanksgiving or
Right.
Christmas or whatever. But in terms of like lifting and working out, I think core workouts as well as leg workouts are so important. The ability for you to sustain G's for a long period of time and these amazing airplanes, whether it's F-22, F-16, whatever it is, it's critical to your success as a fighter pilot. And not only are you just trying to stay awake, and for the audience who doesn't understand that concept, 1G is where we're at right now. We're feeling one force of gravity on our body. As we go to 2Gs, that force of gravity doubles. So effectively, if I'm at 2Gs, let's say my hand weighs 5 pounds, I'm trying to move my hand somewhere, my hand now weighs 10 pounds. And now if I go to 9Gs or plus, which is where the F-22 lives, now it's 45 pounds trying to move my hand somewhere. Imagine like turning in the seat, looking over your shoulder, trying to fight somebody. So you're also maneuvering the controls, you're manipulating the switches and knobs and buttons on the control stick and the throttle. So you're doing all those things under 9Gs of force. And what's more important is that 9Gs of force is also trying to push your blood down to your feet. And that blood is really important because it takes oxygen to your brain, your heart, and your
Yeah.
lungs. And without that, you pass out. So the ability for us to combat that, is really a function of the gear we wear, the G suit that we wear that compresses our legs to keep that blood in our upper extremity, as well as our ability to squeeze our calves, our quads, our glutes, our abdomen to keep the blood in our chest and our brain, so we can basically shrink down the distance that blood has to travel to carry that critical oxygen to us as we're fighting. So I think weight training is incredibly important. And obviously diet is incredibly important. I think there are a lot of benefits to certain diets that are out there. So I don't start some like internet firestorm on your podcast. I won't mention like one's better than the other. But I think being mindful of what you put in your body is really important. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. But I think
Yeah.
weight training is a huge factor in terms of being able to perform at those levels and sustain it for a long period of time. I'll also say that as we work out, imagine if you're a marathon runner and you run a marathon and then you take off like a month and you don't run at all for a month. Like your ability to run that same marathon pace after a month of no running is
Hmm.
almost zero. Your body's not conditioned for it. The
Right.
same with flying jets and pulling G's. If you pull G's all the time, as an example, in the air show, I pulled G's, pulled over 9 G's and I did it every single day almost. So my body was really conditioned to doing that. If I took 2 weeks off and didn't fly a jet for 2 weeks and I came back and just tried to get after it the same way I was before, definitely noticeable.
Yeah. Wow. So with that, this is kind of going to lead into the next transition I was going to talk about to, post demo team and post
Yeah.
active duty. But so what are you currently flying now
So I fly a
for well in
Challenger.
terms of with the guard? Well, I'm
Oh, with the
sorry, in
guard.
terms of
Yeah.
with the guard, yeah.
So I'm actually not flying right now. There's no capacity right now for a part-time F-22 position. So right now I'm working in the kind of in the virtual space. We're developing a sim network that's going to be able to be higher capacity so we can put more people in sims at the same time and do very large scale exercises. And that's one of the areas I'm working in with F-22, but not in a current flying position. I think in the future we're looking at potentially switching airplanes to F-35. We'll see how that pans out. But that would be a flying position, obviously, in F-35. But as of
Right.
now, I haven't flown a Raptor since August of 2022, 2023, sorry.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So your body's probably not very conditioned if you try to go pull some G's right now.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. So with that, so I know you mentioned flying the Challenger, right? So
Yep.
your first, so I'm assuming that's your first type rating
It
post
is. Yes.
military. Okay. So what was that transition like? Kind of getting into civilian commercial aviation.
It's interesting because a lot of the things that we did in the military are based off FAA regulations. that are in the far aim. Sometimes our requirements in the military are more extreme, and sometimes they're just the same as the FAA. So in terms of that knowledge base, I think military aviation really helps you transition to the civilian world pretty easily. And I think the discipline of study habits and all those things were really helpful in the course. And the other thing that I think was really helpful in the course was the fact that in fighter aviation, we don't use autopilots. Like we don't have any kind of autopilot system. We have an attitude hold and an altitude hold, and that's pretty much it. I think the F-35 system is a little more robust than the F-22 one, but nonetheless, most people that fly in the commercial or corporate aviation world all rely upon autopilot. I mean, I did a TBM 960 course down in Orlando, and they threw out this stat that was like, I think it was the average time a TBM owner hand flies the airplane was 2 minutes per flight.
Wow.
I was blown away. It was like 2
Wow.
minutes, and when I was flying fighter jets, all of it's hand flown.
Hand flown.
There's no automation, there's no
Yeah.
plug this into the FMS and off we go, or, oh, you need to proceed this point or change the clearance. Oh, let me just type that in. You're like, nope, I've got to get my iPad out, type in those points, find the lat long coordinates for those points, and then type them in individually into my system via lat long just to create a route to do the thing that the air traffic control folks are wanting me to do. So I think the hand flying, obviously the lack of FMS experience, lack of automation experience was something I had to work on and practice in the simulator.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think all the hand flying experience was super helpful. So when you do, engine failures for takeoff, or you do engine failures airborne, or you do single engine operations, or you're doing autopilot out stuff, or whatever it is, you're just used to doing that anyways.
Right.
So that was really nice. All the steep turns, the unusual attitudes, that was just kind of like normal stuff for the fighter world. And I thought that was super helpful. Like I said, the biggest thing was just automation and learning how to do that, how to use the system effectively. One thing that I was really thankful I had was an amazing sim partner. So he had a bunch of 135 experience, and he was a wealth of knowledge when it came to FMS, the systems, and all that stuff. So I was, blessed that I had a great sim partner that I got to go through the course with.
Yeah, that's really, really surprising to hear that with all the thrust vectoring and everything that you mentioned previously, that you guys don't utilize autopilot and that everything is based off lat and long, because even in the Cessna 172 that I'm flying, we just plug everything into the FMS. Hey, go to this point. Okay, cool. Like direct. So that's
it's really good at killing and breaking things, but it's not really good about just like flying around and shooting instrument approaches. There's a funny story for you. We were in New Hampshire, and one of the jets was, had to have inspection done, and they couldn't waive it until the end of the weekend. So we had to swap tails at Langley. So I fly the jet back to Langley, and as I'm in New Hampshire getting ready to take off, I call up clearance delivery, and I'm like, clearance request, ready to copy, blah, blah. And like, stand by for a new clearance. I'm like, okay, ready to copy. And they read me off like 15 different points. So I'm writing off these 15 different points. I'm in the chocks, just was ready to go. And then they read this whole thing off to me. I'm like, okay. So I go find 15 different points, 15 different sets of lat long coordinates, type 15 points in the system. And then I take off and I request a quick climb. And I was like, hey, I'm going to, just request a quick climb to 380, which is my final cruising altitude for that one. And they're like, yep, approved. So I take off, and within a couple miles of the airport, I'm at 380 already. I'm just rocket ship straight up in the, And then as soon as I get to 380, they're like, hey, Raptor 1, you're cleared direct. And I was like, I just typed in all these coordinates. At least let me fly the thing, like, nope, just cleared direct. I'm like, okay, here we go. So yeah, that was pretty funny.
That's crazy. Okay, so let's just to transition a little bit. We already spoke on how you're with the Guard and you're flying this Part 91 in the Challenger. So what else do you have going on in life and in business post active duty? And what advice would you give to anybody that's currently, making that transition from active duty, whether it's, retirement or to, another service component?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody has figured it out perfectly. I think when you leave the military, especially like you mentioned, retirement, and I'm going to answer the last part first. after 20 years of serving, or even if you're in, for 6 years or 10 years, I was in for a little over 15, you get very accustomed to the people around you, the systems, the processes, and it's kind of like your comfort, zone, if you will, of like the military being that system, that process, that organization that you're used to dealing with. And then you leave that and oh, by the way, like the military, a lot of times you have that purpose. You understand why you're doing what you're doing. You understand that these airplanes are important, or this mission's important, or whatever. So it's very purpose driven. And then you leave, and sometimes you find that the organizations you join aren't purpose driven, and then you find like you're in this crisis like of like character where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Um, so the first thing I would say is like give yourself some grace because you spend a lot of time serving the military and you've built a lot of skills that you may not understand you have until you actually explore them in the civilian world. So a lot of times the military members have a lot of great soft skills, a lot of great organizational, managerial, leadership skills that simply
Right.
aren't common in the civilian world. And we don't realize we have those skills because we're used to being around people that have the same skills.
Right.
So you get out and you're like, oh, I don't have anything to offer. And then you realize, man, I actually do have a lot of things to offer. And now I'm going to apply myself to different things and figure it out. But I think the biggest hurdle is overcoming that sense of I'm leaving this life that I've built for the last 20 years, for retirees or however long you served. And it's just a big adjustment period. I'm almost a year out of the active duty Air Force. And I think I'm just finally starting to hit my stride in terms of getting things going.
Yeah.
Um, because it just takes you a little bit of time to kind of get your feet under you, get a new job, move potentially, and kind of figure out what do I want to do and how do I want to spend my time. Because ultimately, the time we have is the most valuable resource we can possibly have or give to somebody else. And I was talking to my little brother about this the other day, and I explained to him, I was like, well, we're all going to die at some point. We don't know when that day is going to be. We don't, it could be a week from now, it could be 50 years from now. We don't know. But we do know that it's fixed date and time, and every single day we spend after this one is percentage wise more important than the last. And it just exponentially gets more and more and more important until that day when you pass. So I would say for the veterans, like there are a lot of people that have that need the skills that you have in terms of leadership, management, ability to lead teams, organize things, get missions accomplished. That like can do, we'll get this
Yeah.
job done mindset is not as common as you would expect. And once again, those leadership skills are important. So I would say, take it day by day for those folks that are transitioning out of the military, but ultimately realize the skills you have are very important and people want those skills. So it's a matter of like going to the places where people are needing those skills and applying yourself. And I think the value you're going to add to those organizations is going to be something that's going to blow your mind away. And it's going to lead to a lot of purpose and fulfillment because even though it may not be like we're dropping weapons on this target and like it's very tangible in terms of the skill. If you can go to an organization, you can help them and your leadership skills help influence somebody else in your team or in your company and they do well, they get promoted, now they get more rate, they get more paycheck. Now they're able to support their family better. Like the impacts you have in those teams are going to be so important. And I would just not underestimate the skills you have leaving the military and the things you've developed over time. And in terms of things I'm working on, so we talked about the corporate job here in Reno, and I'll just say that finding somebody that you really trust and respect to work for is so important as well. So take your time. Like the company may want you to work for them, but make sure you want to work for the company too,
Right.
right? It has to be a mutual thing. And I'm so thankful that the person I fly for is absolutely amazing. Um, I can't say enough positive things about him in terms of the respect, success he's had, and the way he impacts and influences lives. It's just been incredible. So to be able to be a part of that team and work has been incredibly rewarding. So I'm very thankful for that and the people I get to work with. It's a very small corporate flight department, so I fly with the same person every time, and we're really good friends. I'm actually meeting him after this at the airport. So yeah, it's been really great. And the other things I'm working on as well, I part-time volunteered at a museum down in Southern California, fixing warbirds, so everything from World War I through Vietnam, Korea era. And they've been super busy recently, so I haven't been able to make it down. And hopefully we'll pick it up a little more of that pretty soon. In addition to that, two projects I'm working on. I started a nonprofit organization that's aviation based, looking to inspire young adults to succeed. And that really that's kind of my passion project, if you will. I came up with this idea back in 2020. A buddy of mine was talking, we're talking, had a pretty deep conversation, and he was like, "Man, when you're 80 years old, what do you want to look in the mirror and see of yourself? Like, what is it that you want to leave for the rest of the world? What impact do you want to have?" And I was like, "Man, that's a really deep, question. I need to like think about that for a little bit." So that night I went home and I was just like typing on my phone and like Apple Notes and just like typing away, figuring out what things do I value, what things do I enjoy doing, and how can I impact people in a positive way around me. And I kind of came up with this idea. So this organization that sort of have right now, Uplift Aviation Foundation, is a nonprofit. And right now, I started another consulting company that's, in my mind, a lot of nonprofits fail because they don't have a sustainable model. They, jump into it and they're asking people for money all the time. They're asking for donations and they're having to put on galas and events to get fundraising. And that, in my mind, that's just not a sustainable model. It's not built on something that you can reliably count on every year. And I'd rather spend my time helping people and impacting people than out asking for money. So I started a consulting company, and the vast majority of the profits from that consulting company are going to go straight into the nonprofit to fund it. And if I can keep that consulting company going, then really it's in my power where I have the ability to, fund the nonprofit. And the nonprofit, to quickly summarize, is to take backcountry aviation airplanes, so think like Super Cub, Husky kind of airplanes, and take young adults out flying. So 18 to 25-year-old kids who have gone through some adversity in their life, whether it's their family, substance abuse issues, immigration, whatever it happens to be, right? There are countless things that people go through every day. But there are some amazing young adults out there who have gotten past these things. They could have used faith, family, the military, working out, academia. They could have used any of those things, a combination of those things, but they got past that point, right? And once again, mentors are really important in that process. But I really want to understand what tools do they use and what mindset do they have to get past that point, whatever that hurdle was. How do they get past it? Because what I want to do is take that knowledge and now share it on a large platform to younger kids, people that are in high school, people that are in middle school, because they're probably in the middle of that process. Or they're probably in the middle of that life adversity thing. And they're like crying out for some guidance, some mentorship. And as much as I love the Joe Rogan podcast, listen to it all the time. He brings on some amazing guests, like very, very knowledgeable in subjects. But like, how many 15-year-olds are listening to Joe Rogan's podcast? I don't know, right?
Probably not very many.
Probably not very many, right? There are probably people our age that are interested in different topics, whether it's say space, UFOs, or whatever it is, And I'm like, okay, well, how do we get the knowledge of people that are closer in age group to those kids that are 14 and 15 struggling right now? Because if we can get that age gap shrunk down to a couple of years, now it's more relatable. There could be a 60-year-old billionaire who came from the exact same circumstances as this 14-year-old kid and worked really hard, had amazing mentors, and got to that point where now they're a billionaire in their 60s. But it's just not relatable anymore. A 14-year-old is going to look at this person and be like, "Man, they're super old. I'm never going to be that person."
Right.
But if we take small chunks and small bites out of the apple, and we make that closer in terms of age group, then it's more relatable, it's more tangible, and maybe we can equip young adults, young kids with the skills they need to get past whatever situation they're in and find success in their life. So there's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of the general concept of the nonprofit. And like I said, to me, that's my passion project, because it takes aviation, takes getting outdoors, which I think, like I live in Reno, I'm right next to Tahoe. I really think getting out into nature is one of those things that just makes you much more introspective, think about things in your life and what caused them, what you could have done differently, what things helped you along. It forces you to reflect on yourself and the things you've done in a way that you can't if you're constantly distracting your cell phone, or like, something's happening over here, so you get a call from work and this happened at work. And you're constantly distracted. If you're in the middle of the mountains or you're on a beach somewhere, whatever it is, like if you're away from all the distractions in a really beautiful place, you have the ability to think and reflect. And people find that, through meditation and different techniques like that. But I find that getting out into nature, for me at least, is really helpful. So if I can kind of combine all those things with the goal of helping impact the next generation of kids to do really well in their life, then to me, I'm like, I can't find a better life pursuit. I can't,
Yeah.
I can go out there and make a bunch of money, um, but I'd rather spend my time helping other people out do well because I feel like it's just paying it forward. It's allowing me to take all the amazing mentorship that I've received from family, from friends, from military members that I've served with, taking that and just paying it forward to other people to help them do well. Because ultimately, you know, my family moved here. Most of my family moved here from Cuba in 1966 and fled communism. And they came here with absolutely nothing, and this country
Mm-hmm.
provided them the opportunities to succeed. They didn't know English. They didn't have anything, no dollars, no nothing. They had to close their back, and this country's offered them the opportunity. And I see a lot of young kids who are, like I said earlier on, just distracted and or lack direction. And I
Mm-hmm.
see that as a huge untapped potential. There's so many amazing and brilliant kids out there that really just need some bump steer in the right direction, and they'll do amazing things.
Yeah.
You, like, all they need is a little push in the right direction sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can help them in that journey, even if I contribute 5% of that, then that's 5% well worth it in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, with the nonprofit, so is that are you primarily just having your events or meeting with these kids in your area, kind of the Reno, Tahoe, kind of Lake Tahoe area?
Correct. Yeah. Right now, really, so the nonprofit is kind of like paused right now because I'm working on the consulting company to then generate
Gotcha.
income for the nonprofit, and the goal there
Okay.
is to then buy airplanes. And I've taken some people flying my RV8 that I have, which is super fun. But in
Yeah.
terms of like the nonprofit flying itself, I want to work on the for-profit company, be able to generate enough income to then buy the airplanes and fund the O&M for the nonprofit, so I can kind of just be free and clear of
Yeah.
doing that. And my goal is to work with local nonprofits in Reno and Vegas, work with schools, also work with veteran organizations. I think there's some amazing knowledge we get from veterans, taking them flying. And then the last piece to me that I think is important is finding people, like in hospitals or having, serious medical issues, but are obviously well enough to fly because, I lost my mother to cancer, my grandfather to cancer, a lot of people that have, been impacted with medical conditions. And I feel like when you're at that phase in your life, when you have a life or death illness, you really also think about those things in life that were important to you and the things that weren't. And if we can take that knowledge, I think that's also very valuable and can help impact people's lives in a positive way. And like if you take somebody flying who's in rough shape, you take them around Tahoe at sunrise or sunset, and they see the lake. I mean, it's just stunning. It's
Yeah.
stunning.
Yeah.
So those are all the things I'm kind of working on. And right now, like I said, working on the consulting company first, just so I can ensure the nonprofit stuff is sustainable over time.
Gotcha. Yeah. The reason I asked if you were primarily doing that in that Lake Tahoe area, I've got a guy who I consider him a mentor to me. He's actually a
Yeah.
former Strike Eagle pilot.
Okay.
He's a current instructor down at Columbus. Shout out to Air Jones. But he's also the vice president for a nonprofit that kind of does something similar in
Okay.
terms of STEM and aviation
Yeah.
for underprivileged youth. I'm gonna have to connect you with him.
Yeah. Absolutely. Please.
He's got a couple of events actually coming up later on in the year that I'm gonna go, and he invited me to come and be a part of that.
Awesome.
May be of interest to you at some point if you
I'd
have
love to.
space
Love
on
to
the
help
calendar.
for
Yeah,
sure.
so that's awesome. So yeah, with that, we're getting a little long, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but we'll kind of close it out with a little fun thing I like to call clear for the option, right?
Okay.
So it's just kind of something fun that I do, just kind of some compare contrast, just something for the viewers to get to know you a little bit and get your take, and then we'll kind of wrap it up from there.
Awesome.
So yeah, with that, you're cleared for the option. So let's see here. So you prefer the prestige of flying fighters or the freedom that flying GA, like with your RV, gives you?
I would say I wouldn't even say like it's prestige. I would say I prefer flying fighters because of the camaraderie and because of the team aspect of doing a very important mission. So like I love work. I'll be completely honest. I love doing
Yeah,
that, and
yeah,
to me, that's why fighters are I think would are kind of my preference.
fair enough. VFR or IFR?
VFR,
VFR.
VFR, all day.
Gotcha. Um, so what is your favorite flight you've ever flown?
Oof, tough one. There were a lot of good ones.
You can go around if you need to.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think of I don't know if it's my favorite one ever. Pretty high up there. So we got to do two ship F-22 demo flights with Raz, so my replacement Sam
Yeah.
Raz Larson,
Hmm.
and part of it was to train him up for the heritage flight profile, so he was able to um, kind of understand what flying very low and very slow with like a P-51 or similar aircraft is like, and also flying very close formation. So we have to do that together, which is really cool. And I think that was the first time two F-22s ever got to fly heritage flight profile together. And he also did his demo, and I got to mess around a little bit in that as well. So I think getting to fly with him, we did it twice. So we did it during his training upgrade, and then we also did it for my affinity flight. So my last flight in F-22 was with
Yeah.
Raz, and I think it probably has come across to your viewers already, but the demo team job to me was so impactful, and the team of people that I was honored to travel with was so incredible that I really value that job and really value that team a lot. So it meant a lot to me to be able to fly with Raz, and Raz, by the way, is phenomenal. Like he's just a perfect guy for the job. So to like pass the torch off to him in my last F-22 flight with him was probably one of my favorite stories ever because of the importance of that flight in terms of my last time flying F-22, and also like him getting ready to start the season and travel and represent the Air Force and the F-22 community at air shows.
That's awesome. Um, what's your least favorite flight you've ever flown?
Um, probably probably the one where the F-22 broke on me in Alaska. I almost didn't make it through that one, so
Mm,
I came very close to not being here. And
mm,
you know, it's part of aviation. Things break,
right.
and I'm very thankful that I had the experience and the teaching, the knowledge that I've learned from other instructors, and just the experience I've built up to that point in time that allowed me to react when I did. And I'm also very thankful that the airplane responded the way it did to avoid a surely catastrophic incident. So probably not my least favorite flight, but
Yeah.
also one of the most impactful, right? Because it brought death very close to my face,
Yeah.
and realized, you think about a lot of things when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you're reminded of your own mortality, it tends to
Yeah.
kind of hit a little bit different.
Well,
Um,
it's funny. So I flew an air show in Alaska in 2020, and it was Senior Master Sergeant Cook, Fred Cook at the time. Now he's Chief Master Sergeant out in Hawaii. He was on. We did a bunch of shows or a bunch of TUIs together, and Fred's great. Like I can't say enough positive things about him. So before we went up to Alaska to fly the air show, he was like, "Hey, what what tails do you want?" So I asked for like the first one I asked for was the one that had my name on it, and the second one I asked for was the one that I crashed. He's like, "You want to fly that one?" I was like, "Yeah, we have some things got to work out. Got to wring this
yeah.
thing out a little bit in the demo." But
Yeah.
yeah, you have to even with the discussion of mortality, you have to add some level of humor to it because we could all be gone in an instant. If we're not enjoying life and aren't if we aren't able to sit back and kind of take a couple laughs in, then we're probably taking life a little too seriously.
Right. Right. And we're probably in the wrong business.
Yeah, true.
um, okay. So just a few more things. So what's your favorite part of being a fighter pilot? I think you've probably already hit on it for the most part, but
Yeah, I think just the job and the teamwork that goes into it. Being able to do something that's very intense in an airplane that is obviously very expensive, and the American taxpayers trust you to do it really well. that responsibility was probably my favorite part, in addition to the teamwork. But, not just like pilots, but like AFE, maintenance, like everything that goes into the whole getting the airplane in the air, I think is super important. Yeah.
Awesome. Uh, Least favorite part of being a fighter pilot?
I think being away from family. So I left home when I was 17, and I haven't lived back in Tampa ever since. I've kind of lived all over the place. So missing out on a lot, and I think this kind of goes for most military folks, but missing out on important days, events, family members get sick. You wish you could be there more than you are. So that's probably my least favorite part of it.
Got you. And to wrap this up, kind of going with your Uplift Aviation nonprofit, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give to a young person who's watching or listening to this, who is maybe had a troubled past or not, but is interested in pursuing a career in aviation?
So I think aviation is one of those disciplines, one of those careers that it doesn't matter what you look like, what your background is from. Like, it really comes down to your proficiency in flying airplanes. And in that regard, I think aviation is an amazing career because it opens up so many doors, and all it takes is a lot of dedication and hard work. And oftentimes, you read stories of people that have done really well, and they oftentimes come from really bad circumstances growing up. There were a lot of things in their life that kept just eating away at them over and over and over again. And eventually they said, like, I'm done. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm not taking it. I'm going to choose to make my life a success, to make myself a success. And like I said, we can't discount all the impacts of mentors and family and friends and teachers and all those people. But I think when you're raised, my mom was a single parent raising two kids, like there's so many scenarios out there. When you come from situations like that are tough, you really, really appreciate all the hard work and success. And it gives you that grit that you like. It's hard to teach somebody grit.
Yeah.
It's hard to be like, man, you need to do X, Y, Z. I know it's terrible, but you have to do it anyways because this is going to get you to get you across the finish line. It's hard to teach that. And I think the edge that those kids have as they're coming from like underprivileged areas is that they understand that. They understand pain in a way that most people don't, and they can endure a lot of pain to get to a goal. So while you may think that you don't have what it takes to get to whatever goal it is, you have a lot more than you think than you're giving yourself credit for. And I would say that in those scenarios, aviation is an amazing way to progress your career, and it opens up a lot of doors as well. So I definitely encourage them to look into aviation. There are a lot of amazing programs out there that are either nonprofit funded or funded by major airlines that take people with no aviation experience, put them through school. And so you don't need money. You don't need any fancy connections. Literally, it's just like a lot of amazing organizations have come together to use aviation as a way to teach people, train people, and give them a skill set that's very valuable.
Absolutely. And, organizations like yours and Air Jones that I mentioned, those are definitely good places to start. So definitely appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
But absolutely. So yeah, with that, you're cleared to land.
Awesome.
I appreciate you. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. And even more importantly, one of my biggest goals with this platform is for people to not only be entertained, but also take something away and learn something. I know that today, with what you brought, some learning definitely will occur. So I appreciate you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll get off here. Don't go anywhere. We'll kind of do a quick little debrief after this. But
Sweet.
But yeah, with that kind of concludes this episode. So thanks everybody for watching, and thanks Cabo again.
Thank you.